Okay, so we're going to continue talking about evolution. We have our vocabulary words, and we're probably coming up on a quiz here, possibly Thursday. So, it's stuck. So, what allows this thing to have offspring that don't look like it? To have offspring that maybe, there we go.
Please excuse the interruption, and a student taking the...
That maybe look a little bit like one of these. What allows that to happen? Well, it causes evolution, but what allows that to happen? What allows offspring variation? Yeah, there is natural variation among all organisms. So that gets us back to one of our vocabulary words. So variation allows for this. What creates variation? What allows for variation?
Wouldn't things grow or expand bigger?
Well, those are types of variation that we looked at, yeah. But what allows variation to happen? Why are some of us taller and shorter and have bigger hand spans?
Genes.
Okay, genetics. And some of that genetic variation comes from what? The fact that you are all a bunch of
Cells.
mutants. I'm a mutant too. So is my dog, so is my daughter. So is the maple tree outside. Yeah, so mutations. What are mutations? What are mutations?
Anything that's
No. A mutation is a change
where are we at on this side?
So a mutation is a change in a gene. And those changes in genes allow us to have variation. And variation allows us to have organisms that aren't quite the same. So how does distribution figure into this? How does distribution figure into this? Well, let's look at these bacteria. So let's put up the same slide all over again with those bacteria on it. And let's imagine that maybe in a population, what's a population? What is it? A population is a group of organisms that all live in one place that can reproduce together. So in a population of these bacteria, maybe we look at how long each of those bacterial cells is. And maybe we have a mode there. What kind of distribution would that be? What kind of distribution is that? What kind is it? What kind of distribution is that? Normal distribution. So what if over time that distribution shifts because we get some mutations and we go from having that kind of distribution to having a distribution that looks more like that. What's that one called? That's the weird one. Bifurcated. So that's a bifurcated distribution. Well, if we have that bifurcated distribution, suddenly we can get to a point where these cells and these cells become so different from one another that they no longer have offspring that look the same. That's where we start to get to this situation. That's where we start to see new species developing. Okay? As a result of a bifurcation in the distribution of some trait. You know, and here it's length. It might be something about the coating on the bacteria. Bacteria have a cell membrane. They also have coatings that help trick your body into not recognizing them. So some change happens, some mutation occurs, you get more variation, and sometimes that leads to new species. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the span of time and how species. We mentioned population. This was one of your vocabulary words. All the individuals of a species that live in a specific geographic area and can interbreed. And then we've got this term, natural selection. When an individual has something that suits the environment really well, they're more likely to live. They're more likely to reproduce successfully. That's kind of the heart of evolution. Okay, a couple more vocabulary words to add. An adaptation. You've heard this word. An adaptation is just some characteristic that's inherited, and it ends up being common because it gives some advantage. It confers some advantage. It may start out as a mutation. So let me ask you this: how many blue-eyed mutants do I have in here? Who's got baby blues? Okay, you guys are all related more closely than the rest of us. So, most animals have brown eyes. Most primates have brown eyes. Somewhere, and this was in northern Europe, and it was 10,000 years ago, we can pinpoint how long ago this occurred. There was a single gene mutation that caused the first instance of blue eyes in humans. How do we know that? That seems kind of far-fetched, doesn't it? We can track how long it takes for a particular gene to change, and we can look at how many changes have occurred, and we can basically track all the changes that have happened in a gene. So somewhere in northern Europe, 10,000 years ago, somebody had a baby, and they picked that baby up. And remember that up until then, all humans had had brown eyes. And they picked that baby up, and that baby opened its eyes, and they went, "Wah!" What do we do with it? Not sure. It might be possessed by demons. Well, yeah, it's probably sheer luck of the draw that that blue-eyed child did not get left out to be eaten by the wolves. Okay, probably pure luck of the draw. What advantage could there be to blue eyes?
Prettier.
Well, maybe you think they're prettier. I don't know. I've seen some really beautiful chocolate brown eyes.
Thank you.
But, hey, my husband's got milk chocolate brown eyes. I think they're really pretty. If you are out in intense sunlight, or if you're out in low light, there are differences in how an eye with lots of pigment and how an eye with lower levels of pigment, like a blue eye, behaves in terms of allowing sun in. So, you know, maybe blue eyes survived because people thought they were pretty, which happens. Maybe because they actually had some advantage. But that was a mutation. That's why I call my blue-eyed students my little blue-eyed mutants. That's okay. The rest of us are all mutants, too. If you're not a single-celled organism, you're a mutant. But very often, an adaptation starts off as some kind of mutation. Okay, reproductive isolation. What does it mean to be isolated? Alone. Alone, closed off from other people. So if you can't get to somebody else, you are isolated from them. Tomorrow we are going to start an activity that looks a little bit at reproductive isolation. We're actually going to stop the notes there because what I want you to do is get out your data sheets. We're going to start the process of writing up your results from your work. So you have your data sheet? Okay, get out your data sheets. You're actually going to publish these, and we're going to have them linked on the web. They're going to be online and available for anybody who wants to view them to view. So you kind of have to do a good job because anybody can see them. And we're going to publish a link to them. We're going to put that link on the front page of the website. You're going to need to graph your data. So what kind of graph would be most appropriate? Bar graph? Okay. I would agree. So you can actually use computer tools to graph your data. You can use a number of things. You can use a program like Doceri and change the background. You can do that. I do this a lot in physics. We use a lot of graphing. You can use a program like Excel, and you can put your data in and have it graph it for you. But right now, what I'm going to have you do is you're going to work with your partner, and I want you to look at least 2 different ways to graph your data. Because there are probably 15 ways to graph your data. And we're going to do this electronically, of course. You have in your self-service the Sheets app, Google Sheets app, which is the spreadsheet app. So if you don't have that pulled down yet, go ahead and pull that down. And are you going to put all of your groups on one graph, or will they all be different graphs?
I'd say all are different. Google Sheets. All that are the same.
Yeah, why?
I know what I'm going for, but I don't think
Okay.
it's easier to compare.
Okay, we want to compare. Yeah, we want to be able to compare what happened to the different groups. You can use colors to clarify which group is which, but organizing data is one of the first things that you do after you have data. You have to organize it somehow. And visually organizing data is a really good step. So if you're doing a bar graph, you know, you might have something like this. You know, maybe this is your control group and this is experimental group 1, experimental group 2. You'll have to label those. In this case, where would, this is not as obvious a question as you might think. How are you going to show rate of growth? So which axis is going to be time? X is usually time. Well, if we organize it like this, then isn't this like plant 1, plant 2, plant 3? What would your y-axis be? How are you gonna show both their absolute growth and when they grew? Okay, so that would make this one height. How will you show their daily growth? Okay, that's probably your best bet, is to do something like that. Maybe they had a really good day there. Maybe they slowed down a little bit. So with that, you may want to use Doceri. I can think of a way to do this in Excel, but it's going to be different. I am. Yeah. So that's how you would show it in Doceri. Let's look at how we could do it in something like Excel.